Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express along with the daily mains practice question. In the analysis part, we'll first talk about the future of India's Gen Z with special reference to the employment scenario, the associated challenges and the way forward. Then in the second topic, we'll talk about the weakening of India's textile trade, the associated causes and the way forward. Then in the mains validation, we'll talk about a study which has concluded that the Yamuna floodplains have shrank by almost 1/3 in a century. Then in the prelims pointers, we'll talk about 4 different topics from a special perspective of the upcoming UPSC prelims examination 2027. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is about the future of India's Gen Z. India possesses one of the largest share of the youth populations in the world, what we often describe as the demographic dividend. Now, what you'll have to understand at this point of time is that demographic dividend is not something which gives you automatic economic returns. Again, I'm repeating, demographic dividend is not something which gives you automatic economic returns. It is basically a potential advantage. It is a potential advantage which would only materialize when the education received by the youths that gets transformed into productive, into decent, into formal employment opportunities. We have one particular editorial which has been published in the Hindu, which says that right now India is witnessing a failure. We are witnessing a failure in the labor market transition, with specific reference to this section of the India's population, which is the Gen Z. What it says is, and it uses a lot of data points. One point which I would like to make here, please be cautious with respect to the data points. Analysis is not just about the bombardment of data. It's about basically explaining things. It's about understanding the concepts. Use data in order to corroborate, in order to enhance the quality of your point, right? So this article uses a lot of data points. We'll go through the data points, but you need not to memorize each and every data point. Just try to memorize the few data points which can be used in the answers. The article uses a lot of points. For example, it talks about the PLFS data and the other data sources. What it says is, as I told earlier, that right now we are witnessing a failure in the labor market transition with specific reference to the Gen Z. In terms of, for example, the high unemployment rates, in terms of the low labor force participation rates, specifically the females, in terms of the low social security coverage, in terms of the education not being transformed into productive employment opportunities, the industry relevant skills. So again, a very, very important topic, and not just from one particular domain, rather from multiple perspectives. For example, it is important from the perspective of GS1, the demography population. It's important from the perspective of GS2, the social issues, the human resource development. It's important from the GS3 perspective, employment, labor market, economic development, and also the essay points. We'll try to see what this particular demographic dividend is all about. We'll see what are the issues which are basically plaguing the whole scenario, and what should be the way forward. It's going to be a comprehensive discussion. Gen Z faces unemployment, insecurity, and shrinking pathways to decent work. Now, if we talk about the demographic profile of India, the status, we have the UN report of 2025, the United Nations report of 2025, which says that India has almost 371 million youths. A large share of the population is basically categorized as youths, the young population. And this is what we describe as the dividend, which India can harness only when we invest in productive employment opportunities for the youths. Then there is this 2 concepts. First is we have the Gen Z, those people who are born between 97 and 2012. And then we have millennials, the generation Y, born between 81 and 96. So just remember that. Now, according to the PLFS report of 23 and 24, what it says is that once we talk about the population of the working age Gen Z from the years of 15 to 26 years, it is almost 30 crores. Once we talk about the millennials with respect to 27 to 42 years of age, it's around 35 crores. What is the crux? The crux is that demographic dividend would basically convert into economic dividend once we provide productive employment opportunities. If productive employment opportunities are not there, then this can turn into a demographic disaster. And there is one very important data point which the economic survey of 2018 and 19 talked about. The economic survey of 2018, and you can use it in your answers. It said that if there is an increase of 1% in the working age population, if there's an increase of 1% in the working age population, that can basically transition, or that can have an effect of almost 2% growth in the overall GDP growth. 2% rise in the overall GDP growth, provided that productive employment opportunities are provided to this working age population. So just 1% increase in the working age population can transition to almost 2% rise in the GDP growth rate, provided we have productive employment opportunities. Now, what is the current employment status of the Gen Z? If you look at the education part, what you will see is that still many of the Gen Z are actually studying. They're not involved in the employment opportunities. They're not working. So just see, according to the PLFS, almost 41.7% of the Gen Z males are studying. Almost 38% of the Gen Z females are studying. Now, this has two consequences. If you have a good section of the society which is still studying, it would delay the entry in the employment avenues. That's the very first thing, right? It would basically deprive the labor market scenario to have enough people, because people are giving preference to studying more. Whatever be the reason, but people are giving more importance to studying more. Second is that even after completing the graduation or post-graduation, or in fact sometimes even the PhDs, people are not getting good employment opportunities. Still they are joining very menial tasks, those works which are actually not suited to their educational profile, their educational qualification. So this is the second point: poor quality of employment even after achieving, or even after going for multiple courses, the graduation, the post-graduation, or even sometimes the PhD, right? Next thing is, if we look at the occupational pattern, we have almost, when we talk about the male Gen Z, almost 15.8% are in unpaid family work. Then we have 12.3 as casual workers. Can you just look at the quality of the employment, or where they're actually working? The next is only 14.8%. Just round it off to almost 15%. This data can be used. Almost 15% of the male Gen Z, they are just regular salaried workers, just 15%. And the same number is 4.7% for the female Gen Z. So these two data points are important, can be used in your answers. If we talk about the occupational pattern, 15% for the male Gen Z and 4.7% of the female Gen Z are basically in the regular salaried work. Got it? And it's a very small number. Once we talk about the key takeaway with respect to this, that a significant proportion of these people, they are basically employed in informal, low-paying and insecure employment. So if you have a good section of the society, and that too in the Gen Z, which are basically in this type of informal and low-paying and low-productive employment opportunities, then how would you basically have more of the economic returns? How would you expect more of the value additions in subsequent change? So we don't have productive employment opportunities. Got it? Then if we talk about the labor force participation, now this is a persistent concern. It has been a regular concern. If we talk about Gen Z, it's 41.7%, the labor force participation rate. And for millennials, it's 75. Can you just see the difference? That once we talk about the labor force participation rate of Gen Z, it is much lower as compared to the millennials. Again, the reason can be that more of these Gen Zs are staying in the education, or they don't have productive employment opportunities, or they don't have that kind of, they're not willing to work. Maybe they have degrees, but they are not finding a suitable job, right? If we talk about the rural-urban divide, we have the rural Gen Z share as 41.1%, 44.1%, and urban Gen Z, it's 37.2%. Can you just see the difference? That once we talk about the labor force participation rate in the rural areas, it is more, and in the urban areas, it is less. So what it says, that we have less of opportunities in the urban areas, or we have people who are well qualified, but they don't have the suitable employment opportunities, or they are preferring to stay or to continue the education. They're not preferring to basically work. Then if you talk about the gender gap in labor force participation rate, the male labor force participation rate in the rural areas is almost 60%, in the urban areas is 51%. Look at the female labor force participation rate. In the rural areas, it's 28%. In the urban areas, this data point is important. So we have 3 data points which I've told you. This is the first one, this is the second, and this is the third one, which you can mention in your answers, right? So if we talk about the female labor force participation rate with respect to the urban areas, it's just 21%. We have even lesser females who are basically contributing to the productive employment opportunities, or who are a part of this particular section. So this is a point of concern, because what low labor force participation tells us, that we have a potential, but that is not being used. We have that particular section which can definitely contribute to the overall economic development, not just economic growth. I'm saying economic development. I hope you're clear with the economic growth and the development part, the differences. So they can very well contribute to the economic development, but they're not able to do so, whatever be the reasons. And specifically with respect to the female, the reasons can be that there is, first of all, skill mismatch. The reason can be that they are not getting the flexible workplaces, or there can be the issues with respect to the childcare or the double burden, which we often talk about, very important word, double burden. That on one hand, we have the personal obligation towards the family. Women have personal obligations towards the family, towards the children. On the other hand, they're also expected to earn. So there is a kind of a time poverty which women face, double burden and time poverty. Use this in the context of the females. Got it? Now, unemployment situation, the silent jobs crisis. If we talk about the Gen Z, the unemployment rate is almost 12%. Again, very important data point. This is the fourth data point which can be used. It's almost 12%. The unemployment rate with respect to Gen Z is 12%. Very important data point. For millennials, it's just 2%. And if we talk about the urban Gen Z unemployment, it's almost 17.1%. Can you just imagine? 17.1% unemployment rate. For female, it's even higher, 22.6%. So what it tells us, that even though we have educated youths, but the labor market is not able to absorb that section of the society. There can be multiple reasons. What we are also witnessing is a transition with respect to the kind of jobs, the nature of jobs. Okay? So this has to be kept in mind. The graduate trap. Higher education is no longer guaranteeing the employment. We have many of the people, you must have seen, whenever there is a notification by a government department, let's say 500 seats are notified. We have almost 1 million applications, 10 lakh applications for that. And that includes the doctors, engineers, PhD holders, even for a very, very average position. So that is the kind of condition we are having, right? If you just look at the Gen Z, let's talk about the male graduates. In the male graduates, what is the unemployment rate? Almost 29%. And for the female graduates, it's almost 37%. Can you imagine the unemployment rate? And these are the graduates. For millennials, it's still lesser. The male graduates, it's 5.2%. For female graduates, it's 13.8%. Now, what are the reasons that you have a difference? Bhai, millennials mein jo male graduate hai, they're having less of unemployment rate. But once we talk about the male graduates of the Gen Z, they have a very higher employment rate. Obviously, these male graduates must be younger to the male graduates of millennials category. So the reasons can be, first of all, that right now we are having a kind of a skill mismatch. Whatever education they're having, no doubt they are studying more. But the kind of curriculum and the kind of pedagogy which is there in the institutions, it's more oriented towards the theory aspect. It's not oriented towards the pragmatic. That is the applied side. Practical skills are not being acquired. Rather, the focus is more on theoretical understanding. Now, please understand that in a kind of a transition which we are witnessing, you already know that in the last 5 years, there has been a disruptive change with respect to the artificial intelligence. And those routine tasks, they are no more required because the machine would do it for you. So even though we have a good section of the society, the Gen Z, which is well educated, but they don't have the required skills. And what in addition we are witnessing is a kind of a disruption in the technological landscape. Use these words, disruption in the technological landscape. So these are some of the very important reasons, right? And specifically once we talk about the female graduates, maybe they don't have the adequate workplaces. Maybe the gender sensitive planning is not there in the workplaces, gender sensitive planning at the workplaces. Maybe there are mobility constraints with respect to the movement of these females. There can be the social norms. See, even though we are in 2026, but please understand, there are people who have their mentality based in 1980s or even backward. So they don't even till this day allow the women to go and participate in the economic sphere, in the productive employment opportunities. They don't allow them. So obviously, we have this particular scenario. Now, quality of the employment, informality dominates. So what it says is that the social security coverage with respect to the Gen Z, it's only 20.1%. Just 1/5 of these people who are employed. First of all, we don't have enough number of people who are employed. And whoever are, or this particular section which is employed, only 1/5 of it has social security coverage. Next, job contracts, only 14% of the people have job contracts. Why this is important? Because in the absence of written job contracts, the jobs or that particular person has a constant peril. He or she lives in a constant peril situation, a dangerous situation. Anytime the person can be fired, right? Even among the millennials, only 26% have job contracts, 28% receive social security benefits, but still it's better as compared to the Gen Z. Right? Obviously, the situation is not good, but it's better than that of the Gen Z. Implication, not just unemployment, but insecure work. First of all, we have a large section of the Gen Z which is unemployed. I have given you the data for that. Next, we don't have, and this is the next important data which can be used, the social security coverage. Just use 1/5. 1/5 of those Gen Zs which are employed do not have a social security coverage. So at one position, we don't have, at one point, first of all, we don't have enough number of opportunities. And even those people who are working, they don't have the social security coverage in terms of the pension benefits, in terms of the health insurance, in terms of the family benefits. Got it? Now, what are the structural issues? Very, very important point. If we talk about the structural issues, there is weak education to work transition. Weak education to work transition. Again, as I told you. And there is also one particular report. I have added the important points which can be used in the answers. We have the ILO India Employment Report of 2024, which very clearly says that the higher educational attainment, the higher the unemployment among the youths. People are studying more, but that is not getting converted into productive employment opportunities. Why? Because maybe whatever the people are studying, that is oriented towards the theory, maybe does not match the kind of the industry relevant skills which are required. Industry relevant skills. Industry demands something. People are studying something else. Even in the top colleges of the country, we have many of the professors who are still teaching the same old concepts. I'm not saying theoretical background is not important, but what is the use if you cannot apply it in the real world? If you cannot apply it in different case scenarios, if you're not able to understand the disruptive transformations which are taking place in the technological realm, what is the use of the education, right? Next, we have the gender barriers. We have women who face multiple structural constraints. For example, as I told you, the social norms. Use this in your answers. Social norms, parochial mindsets, backward mindsets, still rooted in or entrenched in those patriarchal notions. Second is with respect to the mobility constraints. There are women who are ready to work, but they live at far off places from the employment sources. So they find it difficult to basically move from one position to the other. That's the reason we have at many of the state governments who have come up with the free travel for the women, and that's a very good step. Then we have third, for example, the workplaces, they're not aligned to the needs of the women. Even in many of the government institutions, there is no provision of the toilet facilities, basic toilet facilities, sanitation facilities for women. Private sector is still doing much better. So this is a serious concern. Then we have, for example, fourth point as child care in terms of the creche facilities. Very, very important concern. So these are some of the reasons which basically hamper which stop women from coming to or participating productively in the labor force, right? The time use survey says that most of the women, they give their time, most of the time goes to the unpaid care work or domestic chores, household work. The time use survey of NSO, most of the time of the women, the females, goes in unpaid care work or domestic chores. Then skill mismatch, India skills report 25, what it says, almost just 50 to 55% of the Indian graduates, they are considered employable. What about the rest 45%? They're not considered employable. They are educated, they have the degrees with them, but they don't have the relevant skill. They don't have the relevant knowledge with respect to a particular industry. So they're, in one way or the other, they're of no use with respect to the industry. From that perspective of the industry, they're not relevant. Next, we have the automation and the AI. We have, see, as I told you, that there is a transformation which is being witnessed. Why do we have more of unemployment as far as Gen Z is concerned and less of unemployment with respect to the millennials? Because millennials have actually, they have crossed that one particular stage or second stage or third stage. Gen Z have entered into a market domain which is now dominated by different technologies, emerging technologies. For example, artificial intelligence. So previously there was a requirement of one particular person at the supply chain for that routine task. Let's imagine a supply chain with respect to the manufacturing of a car. Previously there was a requirement of a man or any employee. Right now what we are having is we have robotics, and that too infused with AI. It does tasks more in a much better manner than this particular person who was earlier employed. So it's more efficient. It does not require that much of resources which the earlier person required. So the automation of the robotics has removed the routine jobs. That is what you'll have to understand. And that's the reason we have more of unemployment. Or let's talk about content creation. Previously we had content creators. Right now, everything, or in fact, even better quality content can be accessed from different platforms. You have ChatGPT, you have Gemini, you have Claude, you have so many other platforms, right? In fact, the World Economic Forum, the Future of Jobs report, very, very important, keep in mind. The Future of Jobs report says that we require, Future of Jobs report of 2025 says that the future would require expertise in certain skills, be it artificial intelligence, be it creative thinking, be it analytical thinking. So just routine cognitive knowledge would not be important. Routine cognitive knowledge would not be important. You'll have to invest, you'll have to upskill or reskill as far as AI is concerned, as far as creative thinking is concerned. Then we have informalization of the employment. Whatever employment opportunities we have, those are informal, not secure, low-paying jobs. We have, for example, Article 42, which talks about the humane conditions of the work. Humane conditions of work. We have Article 43, which talks about the living wage. Living wage. What about that? These are the directives, part of the DPSPs, which are given to the state. Got it? Next, we have weak labor protection. Recently, we had the Noida labor protests, where people were demanding high wages, better working conditions. What is wrong with that? And in the state of UP, the NSA was imposed against some people. Allegedly, see, we're not going into the fact whether they were right or wrong. But the basic demand was to increase the wage, to have better working conditions, right? What should be the way forward? We need to expand the labor-intensive manufacturing. See, we often say that India has witnessed a jobless growth. We have transitioned from agriculture directly to the services, and we have not invested much as far as manufacturing is concerned. We are still not performing in line as if we compare ourselves with the other countries, for example, Vietnam or Bangladesh or China, as far as manufacturing is concerned. So we need to basically focus on labor-intensive manufacturing. We need to come up with that, because that has the potential to absorb a lot of these youths. Let's talk about the textiles, or let's talk about food processing, let's talk about tourism, let's talk about the electronics manufacturing, right? Value addition with respect to the manufacturing aspect. Then strengthen the education to work transition. We need to focus on having the industry-linked curriculum. The curriculum has to be in line with what the industry demands. And for that, we can have partnerships. Partnerships with the industries. Why not institutes in India? At least we can start with the top colleges, and they have started. Many of them have started, some of the IITs. Why not the top colleges start with this thing of partnerships with top manufacturing firms or top technological firms? So that these firms tell the institutes that we are basically looking for those individuals who have this particular skill. And then that skill or the knowledge about that particular skill can be given in the institutions. South Korea is doing that. They have a very robust partnership between the technological firms and the institutions, so that graduates, as soon as they leave their college, they're ready for the industries. Then we have the apprenticeship. Now this focuses upon proper training along with the education. So if we have proper apprenticeship program, what it can do is that it can give that particular skill to those graduates who are still studying, so that they're ready for the industry. Germany is doing that. Then we have the Future Skills program by Singapore, where they are constantly focusing on the reskilling aspect, on the upskilling aspect, even for the working professionals. Even if you're working, you have been in the industry for almost 25 years, doesn't matter. You should focus. You need to have that particular reskilling aspect or upskilling aspect. Then we have align the skill development with the employer needs. Right now, what we are having is a kind of a scenario where there is a focus on supply-driven aspect. Like potatoes, we are having a supply of the engineers into the market. But the point is, does the industry want this kind or this quality of engineers? That is a question. Why not we focus on demand? The kind of demand which industry has, from supply driven to demand driven. Certifications these days, and very important, please pay attention. Certifications which people acquire these days with respect to any industry, it is actually focused on the supply side. People say that we are learning this particular course and we'll be certified. Why not the certification take place from that perspective of the industry, according to industry demand, right? Then we have increase the female labor force participation. For that, focus on safe transport, childcare, gender sensitive workplaces, right? So this has to be given the impetus. Promote the formal employment. We need to have this particular clause in the labor codes, in the laws, that the industry should have a minimum this % of people as employed as a part of the permanent workforce, so that they have the social security, the contracts. Got it? Then we have urban employment expansion. How we can do so? We just saw that in the urban areas, we have more of unemployment. So we need to focus more on the infrastructure creation. Why not we go with plug and play model, where existing facilities are already provided by the government? Or let's talk about the MSME supports. Why not give them the adequate finances? Why not reduce the compliances on them? Why not have concessional finances for them, the MSMEs? Because MSMEs are known as the lifeblood of the Indian economy. Lifeblood of the Indian economy. So if we focus specifically on the manufacturing MSMEs, we can have a change, definitely. So what you'll have to understand is that definitely there is a kind of a mismatch, or we are not having a good relation between the education, between the employment opportunities, between the social security, specifically once we talk about the youths in the country. And if this does not translate, and if we do not focus basically more on improving the conditions with respect to the labor market scenario, then this can turn into a disaster, let alone dividend. So we should focus on all these aspects, and we need to have a full comprehensive approach, and only then we'll be able to realize a vision of Viksit Bharat. Otherwise, a major chunk of the population would stay behind, and they would not be able to transform or convert their potential into a productive economic return, positive economic return. Got it? Let's have a mains practice question. We have India's demographic dividend will remain a promise deferred unless the labor market successfully integrates its Gen Z workforce. There is a lot of talk about the Gen Z, specifically with respect to we have what we are witnessing. If we talk about the Cockroach Janata Party and all these issues with respect to the recent demand of the people to make the education minister resign from his position, this becomes really important. The Gen Z aspect becomes really important, right? So do focus on this. Discuss the structural challenges affecting the education to employment transition of Gen Z in India. Suggest policy measures to ensure productive, formal and inclusive employment opportunities. 15 marks, 250 words. Almost everything with respect to the question has been discussed. Again, this is a humble advice. Please write the answers, because it has no alternative. I always say that. I always give impetus to writing part, because I know that that's the only way to basically see or have your name in the final list. And yes, if you're liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button, and also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about why India lost the textile race. So we have one particular research work which has been authored by Professor Ashok Gulati and Sulakshana Rao, and this has been published on the ideas page of the Indian Express. What the authors argue is that at one point of time, India was one of the strongest pillars with respect to the textile trade around the world. But with time, that status got diminished. And they also say that we have certain strategic advantage which can make India the top exporter as far as the textiles and the apparels are concerned. But we also suffer from many of the weaknesses. So they talk about having stronger institutions. They talk about having a robust framework in order to revitalize the textile trade. Very, very important component of GS3, economy and trade. Now, if we look into the historical context, the legacy of India's textile sector, we can go back to almost 4,500 years ago, and we can talk about the Harappa and the Mohenjo-daro, where many of the archaeological evidences in terms of the spindles, in terms of the whorls, have been discovered. Now, this talks about the expertise which the ancient people had with respect to the textile aspect. And Indian textiles were exported at various regions, to various regions around the world, the West Asia, the Europe, different corners of Asia, right? And there were many famous textile centers. For example, we had Dhaka, we had in Bengal, we had the very fine quality muslin. We had Murshidabad, famous for the silk, right? So many places in India became the centers of textile manufacturing, and that too super quality textile manufacturing, right? Handicraftsmen used to basically come up with these products which were renowned all over the world, right? And the estimates or the study of the Angus Madison, the very famous economist, what he says is that around 1700, India was basically contributing to almost 1/4 of the global GDP. Almost 1/4 of the global GDP in the year 1700 was being contributed by India. And this is by a foreign economic historian, which is Angus Madison. Now, why did India lose its dominance? It was primarily in the context of the Industrial Revolution that we had a lot of technological innovations. For example, in terms of the spinning jenny by James Hargreaves, or for example, in terms of the mechanized weaving. And because of that, what basically happened, it gave a severe blow to the Indian handicraftsmen, because they were investing a lot of effort and time in coming up with that particular product. But now we had things which were mechanized, and that basically affected the Indian production, the Indian textile production. India gradually became a supplier of the raw cotton and a major consumer of the finished items by the Britishers. So Britishers now used to export the finished goods to India, and India was one of the major consumers. Got it? And we just used to export the raw cotton. Present status of India's textile sector: India possesses a fully integrated textile value chain. And this is the strategic advantage which I was talking about in the initial part. Very few countries have this particular strategic advantage in terms of the textile. From the cultivation of cotton, to the spinning, to the weaving, to the manufacturing of the garment, to the export, everything is there in India, but we are not able to exploit that potential, right? Then the authors also talk about very, very important data point, or which should actually make us to invest more in the textile sector. What they say is that the textile sector has an economic potential in terms that if we invest almost 1 crore in this particular sector, in the textile sector, it gives almost 153 jobs. You invest 1 crore in textile sector, it would give you 153 jobs. And for the other sectors, the number is very less. For example, in the automobiles, if you are investing almost 1 crore, it would only give you 27 jobs. For example, in the steel sector, if you invest 1 crore, it would only give you 12 jobs. But if you invest almost 1 crore in textile sector, it would basically give you 153 jobs. So very, very important. Got it? Global export performance. Now, this is a very, very important data. Just look at this. We have the market share of major exporters. Okay? We have China, we have Bangladesh, we have Vietnam, and we have India. And we have the data points with respect to the years from 2000, 2005, 10, 15, 20, 24. Look at this. China's share with respect to the major exporters exporters of the textile. It was almost 17.4% in 2000, and it is almost now 29.4% in the year 2024. Let's look at Bangladesh. It was just 2.2% with respect to the overall market share in the exports in the year 2002, and it has increased to almost 9.2%. Can you see the jump, which has almost 5 times? Almost 5 times. Look at Vietnam. From 1%, it has now a share of almost 6.4%. Its share with respect to the global markets, the exports. Look at what the numbers for India are. It was almost 3% in 2000, 3.1% in 2005, again almost 3% in 2020, almost 3%. Stagnant. India's export share is unchanged for almost 2 decades. It's stagnant at 3%. And this, look at this for Bangladesh and Vietnam. These countries have exploited, they have basically worked in this particular domain, and now they are acting as major exporters of the textiles and apparels around the world. You must have seen, whenever you buy any Adidas or Nike product, just see it's written. Most of the time, there would be this particular badge, made in Vietnam or made in Bangladesh. So if Adidas or a Nike as a company, if they can invest in these countries, why can't they manufacture in India? And that too, once we have the strategic advantage, we are producing the cotton, we have the spinning and the weaving of the cotton facilities, we have the processing, we have the manufacturing of the garments. But still, these companies, these multinational companies, they are preferring these small countries. Now, if we talk about the world apparel exports, it has significantly increased from $185 billion to almost 521.4 in 2004. But our share has remained stagnant at 3%. So what it can tell us is that despite the global trade expanding, India has failed to proportionately increase its share of exports with respect to the textiles and the apparels. Now, why China, Bangladesh, and Vietnam succeeded? And the paper talks about 5 pillars that they have succeeded, or they were able to exploit this particular potential. Why? Because they worked on these 5 pillars. The very first is scale and ecosystem. What the author says is that, for example, in a country like China, they have focused on vertically integrated clusters. From the spinning to the weaving to the garment manufacturing to export, everything is there at one particular place. The clusters. For example, the approach which we have in the PM Mitra, Pradhan Mantri Mega Integrated Textiles, Regions and Apparels. So we are also basically trying to have the spinning, the weaving, the processing and all these things at one particular place so that we can minimize the logistics costs. But China has come up with very, very big clusters. They have very large production centers and they have very efficient supply chains. See, again, what you'll have to understand is that if you have one particular order, if a country A demands order from China, then it has to be delivered on time. If there is a delay, country A would not basically shy to basically shift its production centers to other countries if there is a recurring delay. So if you have efficient supply chains, the delays are reduced. Got it? And end to end, everything from the very first stage to the last stage, everything is there at one particular location. Then we have capital and finance. We have these manufacturers which require concessional finances because it's labor intensive, right? So concessional finance has to be given and these countries focus on that. Then we have export processing zones. For example, in Bangladesh, for the ready-made garments, they provide almost interest-free loans for the production of these ready-made garments. And that's the reason you see made in Bangladesh. Next, we have labor. They are coming up. For example, in Vietnam, they have come up with the industrial parks and they focus on the productivity aspect. So they try to incorporate those technological changes or those technologies in the process which enhance the overall productivity, which enhance the overall efficiency in their supply chains. For example, we have the industry-academia linkage in countries like Vietnam. Over there, the institutions are basically linking with these production centers. Then we have market access. Now these countries have inherent advantage. For example, Bangladesh enjoys the least developed country status. So other countries don't impose that much of tariff on the Bangladesh products as they impose on India's products. Then we have Vietnam. Vietnam has come up with the free trade agreements with multiple countries. And over there, it gets the advantage. Then we have trade facilitation. They have focused on efficient customs, on procedures, port procedures, logistics, documentation. So they have tried to make everything very simplified the regulatory aspect, the compliances in a very simplified format, right? So these are the 5 pillars: scale, capital, labor, market access, and trade facilitation. Major issues affecting India: undervalued Chinese currency. Recently, there was a report of US Treasury and also the report by IMF. The Chinese yuan is being deliberately undervalued from almost 16 to 30% against the USD. Now, if it is undervalued, it acts as the implicit export subsidy. Implicit export subsidy. And it makes Chinese product globally competitive than other countries. Then we have missing middle. In India, we lack the medium-sized export firms. See, we have the production centers, we have the garment manufacturing centers, but we don't have those medium-sized export firms which can basically do a market study and export to different corners of the world. So we lack that. And therefore, the international orders, whatever we receive, they are delayed. Then we have the cotton bias. In India, there is a focus, a greater bias towards the cotton, almost 60 is to 40. Cotton is to non-cotton. But the global average is basically 25 is to 75, because now there is a focus on synthetic textiles, on high value synthetic products, nylon or technical textiles or athleisure, right? Active wear. Slow transition to man-made fibers. We need greater investments in this. We are just focusing on the cotton. We're not investing in the man-made fibers. For example, the nylon. We have many of the athleisure. We have activewear, right? Athleisure, which can be used for the athletics, also for the leisure purpose. So we're not focusing on this particular type. Or technical textiles, geotextiles, right? High costs of capital. In China, the real interest rates are almost 3.1%. If I have to secure a loan for working capital, the real interest is only 3.1% in China. In Vietnam, it's around 1%. In Bangladesh, it's actually negative real interest. In India, it ranges from almost 6.2% to 8.2%. Very high cost of capital. So this acts as a kind of a hindrance for the production of the textiles and the apparels. Then we have GST refund delays. Input tax credit mechanism is very weak in India. People do not get their refunds within time. You have 10 workers employed in your industry. You don't have the refund. The workers would leave. They would go to the other factory. They're not bound by a contract. So working capital is not there. Blocks the working capital. Labor challenges. Sector depends heavily on migrant workers. We have many of these industries which are dependent on the migrant workers. Now the cost of migration has also increased. That is what you'll have to understand. The nature of, see, whenever you have, cropping seasons, these migrants go back to their original places. So at that point of time, the industry faces the labor crunch. Let's say you have one particular industry at a place A, and then you have the migrants who are actually coming to place A and working over there, almost 300 kilometers. Whenever you have the seasons, the cropping seasons, they would go back. And this industry would basically suffer from the labor shortage, right? Weak logistics and compliance. We are not having that much of the logistics, though we have come up with a logistics policy and we have come up with the PM Gati Shakti. We have come up with various interventions, but still logistics aspect is missing. Okay? Or procedures, port procedures, customs, clearances, documentation, compliances, regulatory mechanisms, still weak. Government has a target that by 2030, we need to have this export value of the textiles and apparels to almost $100 billion. We need to increase the export value of these textiles and apparels to $100 billion. Very, very ambitious target. So what we should do for this? Adopt an ecosystem approach. These 5 pillars: scale an ecosystem, capital, labor, market access, and trade facilitation. We need to focus on these 5 pillars which Chinese or the Vietnamese or the Bangladeshis firms have basically gone with. Then strengthen the PM Mitra parks. Very, very important. The government came up with this particular mega integrated textiles, regions and apparels park, which again the very objective was to reduce the overall logistics costs. We need to give more of impetus. It has been implemented in 7 states, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, UP. Why not give more impetus to that? Why not come up with a cluster-based approach? Plug and play model. Use these words in your answer. ठीक है? Single institutional framework. कि भाई एक ही institution and there's one particular institution, the special purpose vehicle that has all, it would give all the clearances. No multiple agencies, no red tapeism. Then we have promote the man-made fibers and technical textiles. Very, very important technical textiles. For example, we have the geotextiles used in the construction. The nets, you must have seen the green nets used in the construction. Or for example, we have in the medical line, we have the use of these cotton, so many things. So let's focus on that. High value synthetic fibers, improve trade facilitations, focus on having easier customs procedures, logistics, paperwork, or the e-way bill. We have the e-way bill, but still there are issues with respect to e-way bill. We have the harassment by these officials of the innocent people who are carrying goods from one place to the other. So it basically, see, even if the person carrying the goods has all the documents, if you have a stoppage, if there's a stop which is imposed by these agencies, by the police officials or the tax authorities, then it delays the overall consignment. Okay? Improve the labor availability. We have the example of Pearls Global's Muzaffar unit, which is near to these labor sources. So why not come up with those production centers which are near to the labor sources, and also enhance the female labor force participation rate, because this is a labor intensive task, and we already saw in the very first topic that we have less of female labor force participation rate. Ensure the faster refunds so that the people have adequate working capital with them. Okay? Include in the FTAs. We have come up with a lot of FTAs, for example, with the European Union, recent CETA with the UK. So incorporate this aspect that we would have a kind of a concessional framework, or we would be given a preferential treatment with respect to the textile exports. Because again, this is a very labor intensive industry, and if we focus on this particular part, definitely we can regain the status which we had before, right? Very, very important sector. It's a very labor intensive sector, and all these measures are definitely required. Let's have a mains practice question, just a 10 marker. Examine the constraints affecting the competitiveness of India's textile and apparel sector. Suggest measures to build a globally competitive, employment intensive textile ecosystem. 10 marks, 150 words. Please do write this particular answer. Let's go to the mains validation part. To come to the mains validation part, we have one particular study which has been published in the Journal of Geological Society of India. It was a collaborative study between Delhi University and IISER, which has concluded that the floodplain size of Yamuna, it has shrunk by almost 1/3 in the last 100 years. Now, this is primarily because of the anthropogenic factors, the human-induced factors. So whenever there's a question which deals with the ecological degradation, you can mention this particular thing, right? The study has reconstructed the river's evolution using historical maps, the satellite imagery, and the Survey of India records. Findings kya hai? What are the findings? Yamuna's floodplains have shrunk by nearly 1/3 over the last 1 century. The river channel has narrowed by about 68% over the past 2 centuries. The channel has narrowed. You have to understand. And this is primarily because of the encroachment by the humans on the floodplains. The river's formative channel maintaining discharge has declined by nearly 89%, reducing its ability to naturally shape the channel and carry sediments. Now, what you'll have to understand is that because of these encroachments, the river is not having its natural flow. It has been altered because of human interventions. Around 45 square kilometers of floodplains have been disconnected due to embankments and urban development. The area covered by the sediment deposits declined sharply from 20 square kilometers to about 4 square kilometers. Major causes, this is important. Construction of Tajewala, Vazirabad and Okhla barrages. Nearly 90% of the Yamuna's flow is diverted at Hathni Kund barrage, leaving very little fresh water in Delhi stretch during the lean season. See, the very objective of constructing these barrages initially was good. It was bona fide. But it has resulted into something. It has degraded the floodplains of the Yamuna. And it leaves very little fresh water for the people of Delhi, especially in the lean seasons, in the summers. Rapid urbanization, embankments, infrastructure development have constrained the river corridor. Encroachment of floodplains for agriculture, settlements, and other development activities can be used as a case study in the answers. Implications: reduce natural capacity of the river to accommodate high flood flows. Whenever there is a kind of a monsoon activity, or whenever there is an increase in the water flows, the river channel is not in a capacity to have that or manage that flow. So you have frequent flooding at the nearby areas. Increased flood vulnerability in Delhi. During the July 2023 floods, the Yamuna reached a higher water level than the 78 flood, despite carrying less water, because the passage has been narrowed. Got it? Because flood waters were confined within a narrower river channel. Degradation of river ecology and aquatic ecosystems also affects the aquatic life. Ensure adequate environmental flows to maintain the river's health. Upgrade the sewage treatment plants and improve the condition of the major drains. We have, for example, the Najafgarh drain. Promote the use of treated wastewater instead of fresh water wherever feasible. For some of the purposes, for example, gardening, we can use the treated wastewater. Why not? Reduce Delhi's dependence on the Yamuna for fresh water, prevent further encroachment and recognize the floodplains as dynamic ecological systems. So they are basically living systems, you have to understand. And if there is a kind of an artificial encroachment, a deliberate encroachment of these areas, it would affect the overall natural ecosystem, right? Not land for reclamation or urban development. Adopt a long-term hydrogeomorphic approach to river restoration rather than focusing solely on the river flow. So we cannot just focus on the river flow aspect. Rather, we need to also incorporate a comprehensive approach which gives importance to the geomorphic processes also and the water flows. So we need to have a comprehensive strategy. Let's go to the prelims pointer section. Now coming to the prelims pointers, we have the very first topic which talks about a report published by the ICMR which says that almost 9 in 10 Indian adults have abnormal lipid levels, that is the cholesterol levels, the fat levels in the blood. A national study by the ICMR analyzed the lipid profiles of almost 23,000 adults across different states and UTs. The study found that almost 9 in 10 adults have at least one abnormal lipid, cholesterol or fat, making dyslipidemia a major public health concern. Dyslipidemia was found, that is the abnormal levels of cholesterol in the blood, was found to peak among the adults aged between 30 to 39 years, indicating an early risk of cardiovascular diseases. Now there are different types of cholesterol. Let's go through that because a question can be asked. We have the high density lipoprotein, HDL, the good cholesterol, removes the excess cholesterol from the blood vessels and carries it to the liver for disposal. Low HDL is harmful as it increases the risk of heart disease. So there has to be a proportionate level of the HDL in the blood. Most common abnormality, 66.8% had low HDL. LDL, low density lipoprotein, bad cholesterol, deposits the cholesterol in the artery walls, what we call as atherosclerosis, increasing the risk of heart attack and stroke. Almost 50% of adults had high LDL. Triglycerides, a type of fat stored in the body for energy. High levels increase the risk of heart disease and are often linked to high carbohydrate intake. Almost 30% had high triglycerides. Total cholesterol represents the overall cholesterol level, the HDL, LDL and the other lipids. High total cholesterol indicates increased cardiovascular risks. It can be stroke, it can be heart attacks, it can be anything. Almost 22% had high total cholesterol. Key findings, around 355 million Indians have abnormal lipid levels despite having normal blood sugar, normal blood pressure and no obesity. So this can be an invisible hazard. It can be something, an invisible thing that you are, there can be a person who is not obese, who is having a perfect sugar, but still the person can suffer from these abnormal levels of the lipids, indicating a hidden risk of heart disease. Women have higher prevalence of dyslipidemia than men. Urban populations are more affected, although the urban-rural gap is narrowing due to changing lifestyle. South Asians have unique metabolic profile, often characterized by low HDL and high triglycerides, even when the body weight is normal. Risk factors, the sedentary lifestyle and physical inactivity, unhealthy carbohydrate-rich diets and processed foods. We have high sugar and salt content, right? Obesity, diabetes and hypertension, genetic predisposition combined with poor lifestyle habits. Concerns, dyslipidemia often has no symptoms, allowing unhealthy fats to accumulate in the arteries over time. Early onset from 30 to 39 years means longer lifetime exposure to cholesterol-related damage, increasing the risk of premature cardiovascular diseases. Young, slim or non-diabetic individuals should not assume that they are free from risks. What should be the way forward? Begin cholesterol screening at earlier age instead of waiting for diabetes or hypertension to develop. Promote healthy diets, regular physical activity, weight management, and tobacco cessation. Increase public awareness about the importance of HDL, the good cholesterol, not just total cholesterol. Strengthen preventive healthcare through regular lipid profile testing, especially the adults in their 30s. So this should be basically adopted. And let's go to the next topic. So India has achieved a feat with respect to the launch of Vikram 1, and this gives us the opportunity to discuss the importance of low Earth orbit, why it matters to India, India's space ambitions. Vikram 1, developed by Skyroot Aerospace, became India's first privately developed launch vehicle to successfully place technology demonstration satellites, what we call as TDS, into low Earth orbit. With this achievement, India becomes only the third country after the US and China to have private launch capability. The milestone follows the opening of India's space sector to private players in 2020 and the Indian space policy. And for that, we have the Antariksh, we have the NSIL, we have the InSpace, very important agencies. Do study about the important role played by these three organizations. What is the low Earth orbit? So we have different orbits. For example, we have the low Earth orbit from 500 to 2,000 kilometers. We have the medium Earth orbit, 8,000 to 20,000. And then we have the GEO till 35,786 kilometers. LEO lies between 160 kilometers and 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Satellites in the LEO complete one orbit in about 90 to 120 minutes. It's ideal for communication and internet services, Earth observation, weather forecasting, reconnaissance, and surveillance. Its proximity to Earth ensures low latency, means time taken to basically transfer the signal from the Earth to the satellite and again back, it is very less, making it suitable for modern communication networks. Why is LEO becoming strategically important? This operates on a first come, first served basis, subject to ITU's, International Telecommunication Union's coordination of radio frequencies. Tell me one very important fact associated with ITU, International Telecommunications Union. Countries are racing to occupy the orbital shells, specific altitudes and orbital inclination, leading to the deployment of mega constellations by China. Early access provides long-term strategic and commercial advantages. Significance of Vikram 1 strengthens India's private space ecosystem, enhances India's capability to launch small satellites, and India is the only third country which has achieved this particular feat. That is incorporation of private entities without depending solely on ISRO, builds sovereign launch capacity, crucial for intelligence, surveillance, communications, and reconnaissance, and national security, supports rapid deployment of satellites during the emergencies and strategic contingencies, marks an important step towards developing competitive commercial launch industry. Challenges: India still trails major space powers in launch frequency. Let's talk about US, SpaceX, or the other entities which are very active. Commercial scale. Absence of a fully usable, reusable launch vehicle limits the cost competitiveness. SpaceX has the technology with it. ISRO's next generation launch vehicle is expected to be in the mid-2030s. Limited manufacturing scale and infrastructure, high capital requirements, and relatively low commercial demand. What should be the way forward? Increase the frequency of commercial launches, accelerate the development of reusable launch vehicles, strengthen the public-private partnerships and support space startups, expand the government procurement from private firms, build the indigenous satellite and launch ecosystems to reduce the dependence on the foreign powers. So this should be the way forward. Strengthening the institutions such as InSpace, or for example, the Antariksh or the NSI, right? Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic is a mention of the CIC, the Central Information Commission, which has directed the Indian Institute of Technologies to constitute high-level committees to recommend measures for preventing such deaths and mitigating the factors that contribute to them, the suicides, right? So let's talk about the CIC and the State Information Commissions. CIC is a statutory body constituted under the Right to Information Act. Similar to CIC, SIC is also a statutory body constituted under Section 15 of the Right to Information Act. The main objectives are to exercise the powers conferred under the RTI Act, to receive and inquire into the complaints from any citizens, to receive and decide upon the second appeal from any citizen, to perform the duty of monitoring and reporting with respect to the RTI Act. Now, let's talk about the composition. If we talk about the composition, we have the CIC consists of the Chief Information Commissioner and not more than 10 Information Commissioners. The same thing, the SIC consists of State Information Commissioners and not more than 10 State Information Commissioners. Appointment, they're appointed by the President, CIC, on the recommendation of the committee consisting of the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition in the Lok Sabha, and the Union Cabinet Minister nominated by the Prime Minister. They're appointed by the Governor, the SIC, on the recommendation of a committee consisting of Chief Minister, the Leader of Opposition, and a State Cabinet Minister nominated by the Chief Minister. Eligibility: the members of the CIC and the SIC shall be the persons of eminence in public life with wide knowledge and experience in law, science, and other domains. Members shall not be a member of the Parliament or a member of the Legislature of State or UT, as the case may be, or hold any other office of profit or connected with any political party or carry any business or pursue any profession. Tenure: the member shall hold the office for such term as prescribed by the central government or until they attain the age of 65 years of age. Reappointment: the CIC's Chief Information Commissioner is not eligible for reappointment. Each IC shall, on vacating his office, be eligible for appointment as a CIC. Further, his or her term of the office shall not be more than 5 years in aggregate as the IC and the CIC. Every State Information Commissioner shall, on vacating his office, be eligible for the appointment as State Chief Information Commissioner. Further, his or her term of the office shall not be more than 5 years in aggregate as the State Information Commissioner and the State Chief Information Commissioner. Removal: the President can remove the members of the CIC and the Governor can remove the members of the SIC from the office under the following circumstances: if the member is adjudged and insolvent, has gone bankrupt, if the central government or the Governor for the SIC holds him responsible for an offence involving moral turpitude, or he is convicted for such an offence, if he engages during his term of office in any paid employment outside the duties of the office, if he is declared unfit by reason of infirmity of mind or body by the President or the Governor. With respect to the SIC, the President or the Governor can also remove the members on the ground of proved misbehavior or incapacity. In such cases, the President or the Governor has to refer the matter to the Supreme Court for an inquiry. After the inquiry, the Supreme Court upholds the cause of removal and advises so, then the President and the Governor can remove them. With respect to the aspect of proved misbehavior or incapacity, an inquiry of the Supreme Court is needed. During the inquiry by the Supreme Court, the President or the Governor, with respect to SIC, may suspend the member from the office or prohibit from attending the office. Salary: the salary allowances and the other service conditions shall be prescribed by the central government, and this was done through the RTI amendment. And there was a lot of havoc which was created, a lot of chaos, because what many people said, that government is trying to basically stifle these institutions, trying to suppress the freedom or the autonomy of these institutions. Jurisdiction: it extends over all the central public authorities, and with respect to the state, it extends over all the state public authorities. So this is what you have to know with respect to this particular article. Let's go to the next one. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion is a mention of the Union Home Minister inaugurating the Immersive Language Museum. Union Home Minister has inaugurated the Shabdlok Museum of Word at National Library, Kolkata, developed by the National Library under the Ministry of Culture. National Library under the Ministry of Culture. Do remember, it is India's first immersive language museum. The museum aims to preserve India's linguistic and cultural heritage, virasat, while promoting the awareness of country's diverse languages. We all know that India is a country which has multiple thousands of languages. So it's really important to basically save or to make sure that there is proper safeguard with respect to these languages so that they're not extinct. Features 9 thematic galleries showcasing the history, evolution, and cultural significance of Indian languages. Presents language as a living and evolving entity that shapes the society and is shaped by it. The first phase highlights the diversity of Indian languages, scripts, and literature. Uses digital displays, holograms, interactive installations, and motion sensor technology to provide an immersive learning experience. Celebrates all the 22 languages listed in the 8th schedule of the Constitution, tracing their evolution from oral traditions and ancient manuscripts to printed literature and modern digital texts. Preserves India's rich linguistic diversity and intangible cultural heritage. This is intangible cultural heritage which cannot be touched. Promotes awareness of the historical role of the languages in shaping India's civilization, literature, and knowledge systems. Encourages the younger generation to appreciate and engage with India's multilingual legacy through technology-enabled learning. Reinforces the idea that language is a medium of cultural identity, social cohesion, and national integration. Let's also go through the value additions. Articles 343 till 351 deal with the official language and promotion of Hindi, while Article 29 protects the cultural and linguistic rights of minorities. The 8th schedule recognizes 22 Indian languages, promoting their development and preservation. UNESCO declares 21st February as International Mother Language Day, highlighting the importance of linguistic diversity and multilingualism. National education policy focuses on the mother tongue-based learning. Mother tongue language, local language as a medium of instruction so that there is proper cognitive development at the early stage, right? At the foundation stage, and promotes multilingualism. Cultural significance: India is one of the world's most linguistically diverse countries with hundreds of languages and thousands of dialects, making language preservation central to safeguarding the nation's intangible cultural heritage. Similar institutions such as the Planet Word Museum, which is in Washington, D.C., use immersive technologies to promote the language learning and cultural engagement, reflecting a growing global emphasis on preserving the linguistic heritage. So that's all from my side. I hope you really enjoyed the discussion. All the very best. Thank you.